chapter 9, Bahá'u'lláh. Bahá'u'lláh appeared at the time when the Persian Empire was immersed in profound obscurantism and ignorance, and lost in the blindest fanaticism. I'm going to imagine obscurantism is like obscurity. You know, I like doing this when I study the writings, any little words, practice of deliberately preventing the facts or full details of something from becoming known. So there you go. That's what they're immersed in, doing that. In the European histories, no doubt, you have read detailed accounts of the morals, customs, and ideas of the Persians during the last centuries. It's useless to repeat them. Briefly, we will say that Persia had fallen so low that to all foreign travellers it was a matter of regret that this country, which in former times had been so glorious and highly civilized, had now become so decayed, ruined, and upset, and that its population had lost its dignity. It was at this time that Bahá'u'lláh appeared. His father was one of the viziers, not one of the ulama, as all the people of Persia know. He had never studied in any school, nor had he associated with the ulama, or the men of learning. The early part of his life was passed in the greatest happiness. His companions and associates were Persians of the highest rank, but not learned men. So this ulama is a part of Islamic clergy. For people who don't know about Islam, the scholars, the scholars of Islam. So he'd spent no time with them. The early part of his life was passed in great happiness. His companions and associates were Persians of the highest rank, but not learned men. As soon as the Bab became manifest, Bahá'u'lláh said, "This great man is the Lord of righteousness, or is the Lord of the righteous, and faith in him is incumbent upon all." And he arose to assist the Bab, and gave many proofs and positive evidences of his truth. In spite of the fact that the ulama of the state religion had constrained the Persian government to oppose and resist him, and had further issued decrees ordering the massacre, pillage, persecution, and expulsion of his followers. In all the provinces they began to kill, to burn, to pillage the converts, and even to assault the women and children. Regardless of this, Bahá'u'lláh arose to proclaim the word of the Bab with the greatest firmness and energy. Not for one moment was he in concealment. He mixed openly with his enemies. He was occupied in showing forth evidences and proofs, and was recognized as a herald of the word of God. In many changes and chances, he endured the greatest misfortunes, and at every moment he ran the risk of being martyred. He was put into chains and confined in an underground prison. His vast property and inheritance were pillaged and confiscated. He was exiled 4 times from land to land, and found rest only in the greatest prison. So this is in Akka, in Haifa, Israel. So he's exiled from Constantinople and Adrianople and other, exiled 4 times from 4 different places, and in the end ended up in Akka in Israel. In spite of all this, he never ceased for one instant his proclamation of the greatness of the cause of God. He manifested such virtue, knowledge, and perfections that it became a wonder to all the people of Persia. So much so that in Tehran, Baghdad, Constantinople, Rumelia, and even Akka, every one of the learned and scientific men who entered his presence, whether friend or enemy, never failed to receive the most sufficient and convincing answer to whatever question was propounded. All frequently acknowledged that he was alone and unique in all perfections. It often happened that in Baghdad, certain Mohammedan ulama, Jewish rabbis, and Christians met together with some European scholars in a blessed reunion. Each one had some question to propose, and although they were possessed of varying degrees of culture, they each heard a sufficient and convincing reply and retired satisfied. Even the Persian ulama, who were at Kabila and Najaf, chose a wise man whom they sent on a mission to him. His name was Mullah Hussein Amu. He came into the holy presence and proposed a number of questions on behalf of the ulama, to which Baha'u'lláh replied. Then Hussein Amu said, the ulama recognized without hesitation and confessed the knowledge and virtue of Baha'u'lláh, and they are unanimously convinced that in all learning he has no peer or equal, and it is also evident that he has never studied or acquired this learning. But still, the ulama say, we are not contented with this. We do not acknowledge the reality of his mission by virtue of his wisdom and righteousness. Therefore, we ask him to show us a miracle in order to satisfy and tranquilize our hearts. Baha'u'lláh replied, although you have no right to ask this, for God should test his creatures, and they should not test God. Still, I allow and accept this request. But the cause of God is not a theatrical display that is presented every hour, of which some new diversion may be asked for every day. If it were thus, the cause of God would become mere child's play. The ulamas must therefore assemble and with one accord choose one miracle, and write that after the performance of this miracle they will no longer entertain doubts about me, and that all will acknowledge and confess the truth of my cause. Let them then seal this paper and bring it to me. This must be the accepted criterion. If the miracle is performed, no doubt will remain for them, and if not, we shall be convicted of imposture. The learned man, Hussein Amu, rose and replied, there is no more to be said. He then kissed the knee of the Blessed One, although he was not a believer, and went. He gathered the ulama and gave them the sacred message. They consulted together and said, this man is an enchanter. Perhaps he will perform an enchantment, and then he shall have nothing more to say. Acting on this belief, they did not dare to push the matter further. This man Hussein Amu mentioned this fact at many meetings. After leaving Kabila, he went to Kermanshah and Tehran and spread a detailed account of it everywhere, laying emphasis on the fear and the withdrawal of the ulama. Briefly, all his adversaries in the Orient acknowledged his greatness, grandeur, knowledge and virtue, and though they were his enemies, they always spoke of him as the renowned Baha'u'lláh. At the time when this great light suddenly arose upon the horizon of Persia, all the people, the ministers, the ulama, and men of other classes rose against him, pursuing him with the greatest animosity, and proclaiming that this man wishes to suppress and destroy the religion, the law, the nation, and the empire. The same was said of Christ, but Baha'u'lláh alone, and without support, resisted them all, without ever showing the least weakness. At last they said, as long as this man is in Persia, there will be no peace and tranquility. We must banish him, so that Persia may return to a state of quietude. Yeah, so they banished him for being the manifestation of God. It happens every time, right? Well, they killed Jesus. They chased Muhammad out of, was it Mecca that he was in first, or Medina? Whichever one it was first. We read it a minute ago. And they banished Baha'u'lláh out of Iran. They proceeded to use violence toward him, to oblige him to ask for permission to leave Persia, thinking that by this means the light of his truth would be extinguished. But the result was quite contrary. The cause became magnified, and its flame more intense. At first it spread throughout Persia only, but the exile of Bahá'u'lláh caused the diffusion of the cause throughout other countries. Afterward his enemies said, Iraqi Arab is not far enough from Persia. We must send him to a more distant kingdom. This is why the Persian government, determined to send Bahá'u'lláh from Iraq to Constantinople. Again the event proved that the cause was not in the least weakened. Once more, they said, Constantinople is a place of passage and of sojourn for various races and peoples. Among them are many Persians. For this reason, the Persians had him further exiled to Rumelia. But when there, the flame became more powerful and the cause more exalted. At last the Persians said, not one of these places is safe from his influence. We must send him to some place where he will be reduced to powerlessness, and where his family and followers will have to submit to the direst afflictions. So they chose the prison of Akka, which is reserved especially for murderers, thieves, and highway robbers. And in truth, they classed him with such people. But the power of God became manifest. His word was promulgated, and the greatness of Bahá'u'lláh then became evident. For it was from the prison, and under such humiliating circumstances, that he caused Persia to advance from one state into another state. He overcame all his enemies, and proved to them that they could not resist the cause. His holy teachings penetrated all religions, and his cause was established. Indeed, in all parts of Persia, his enemies arose against him with the greatest hatred, imprisoning, killing, beating his converts, and burning and razing to the ground thousands of dwellings, striving by every means to exterminate and crush the cause. In spite of all of this, from the prison of murderers, highway robbers and thieves, it became exalted. His teachings were spread abroad, and his exhortations affected many of those who had been the most full of hatred, and made them firm believers. Even the Persian government itself became awakened and regretted that which had arisen through the fault of the ulama. Yeah, so just like in the early days of Christianity where they were killing the Christians, the same happened to Baha'is. A lot of Baha'is, a lot of followers of Bahá'u'lláh were martyred for this cause. So, continue. When Bahá'u'lláh came to this prison in the Holy Land, the wise men realized that the glad tidings which God gave through the tongue of the prophets 2,000 or 3,000 years before were again manifested, and that God was faithful to his promise. For to some of the prophets he had revealed and given the good news that the Lord of hosts should be manifested in the Holy Land. All these promises were fulfilled, and it's difficult to understand how Bahá'u'lláh could have been obliged to leave Persia and to pitch his tent in this Holy Land, but for the persecution of his enemies, his banishment and exile. His enemies intended that his imprisonment should completely destroy and annihilate the blessed cause, but this prison was in reality of the greatest assistance and became the means of its development. The divine renown of Bahá'u'lláh reached the east and the west, and the rays of the sun of truth illuminated all of the world. Praise be to God. Though he was a prisoner, his tent was raised on Mount Carmel, and he moved abroad with the greatest majesty. Every person, friend or stranger, who came into his presence used to say, "This is a prince, not a captive." So he got exiled all the way to Israel, and in doing so fulfilled the prophecies of the promised one being in the Holy Land. So he was forced there. He didn't choose to go there. It was, there was a divine plan underneath it all. Upon his arrival in prison, he addressed an epistle to Napoleon, which he sent through the French ambassador. The gist of it was, "Ask what is our crime, and why we are confined in this prison and this dungeon. Napoleon made no reply. So Napoleon III. Not to be confused with Napoleon. Head of state of France. Yeah, ruler of France. So, after Napoleon, then a second epistle was issued, which is contained in the Suri-i-Hakal. The epitome of it is, O Napoleon, as thou hast not listened to my proclamation, and as thou hast not answered it, thy dominion will before long be taken away from thee, and thou wilt be utterly destroyed. So he gave Napoleon a chance to help him. This epistle was sent to Napoleon by post, through the care of the Caesar Kitafakau. Let's see who he is. Maybe Google. Well, no one really cares about him because he's got no internet presence. What's it say here? Number 8. Son of the French consul in Syria. Okay, so Syrian. So I'll just start again from here. This epistle was sent to Napoleon by post through the care of Caesar Kitafakau, as was known to all the companions of his exile. The text of this warning reached the whole of Persia, for it was at that time that the Kitabi Hakal was spread in Persia, and this epistle was among the contents of this book. This happened in AD 1869, and as this Suri-i-Hakal was circulated in Persia and India, and was in the hands of all believers, they were awaiting to see what would come to pass. Not long after, in AD 1870, the war between Germany and France broke out. And though no one at the time expected the victory of Germany, Napoleon was defeated and dishonoured. He surrendered to his enemies, and his glory was changed into deep abasement. Plus, he didn't help Bahá'u'lláh. That was put upon him. Tablets were also sent to other kings, and among them was a letter to H.M. Nasruddin Shah. His Majesty, I guess H.M. is His Majesty Nasruddin Shah. In that epistle of Bahá'u'lláh said, "Have me summoned, gather the ulama, and ask for proofs and arguments, so that the truth and falsehood may become known." Nasruddin Shah, H.M. Nasruddin Shah sent the blessed epistle to the ulama and proposed to them that they should undertake this mission, but they dared not do so. Then he asked 7 of the most celebrated among them to write an answer to the challenge. After some time they returned, and they returned the blessed letter, saying, "This man is the opposer of religion and the enemy of the Shah." His Majesty the Shah of Persia was much vexed, and said, "This is a question for proofs and arguments, and of truth or falsehood. What has it to do with the enmity of the government? Alas, how much we respected these ulama, who cannot even reply to this epistle." Briefly, all that was recorded in the tablet to the kings is being fulfilled. If from the year AD 1870 we compare the events that have occurred, we will find everything that has happened has appeared as predicted. Only a few remain, which will afterward become manifest. So although foreign people and other sects who were not believers attributed many wonderful things to Bahá'u'lláh, some believed that he was a saint, and some even wrote treatises about him. One of them Sayyid Davudi, a Sunnite savant of Baghdad. It's a mouthful for me. Sayyid Davudi, a Sunnite servant of Baghdad. I wonder if Sunnite is a Sunni. Anyway. Wrote a short treatise in which he related certain supernatural acts of Bahá'u'lláh. Even now, in all parts of the East, there are some people who, though they do not believe in his manifestation, nevertheless believe him to be a saint and relate his miracles attributed to him. So, let's see what that is. Member of one or two of, yeah, so it's just Sunni. The Sunni and Shia, that's the Sunni side. Okay. To sum up, both his antagonists and his partisans, as well as all those who were received in the sacred spot, acknowledge and bore witness to the greatness of Bahá'u'lláh. Though they did not believe in him, they still acknowledged his grandeur. And as soon as they entered the sacred spot, the presence of Bahá'u'lláh produced such an effect on most of them that they could not utter a word. How many times it happened that one of his most bitter enemies would resolve within himself, I will say such and such things when I reach his presence, and I will dispute and argue thus with him. But when he entered the holy presence, he would become amazed and confounded, and remain speechless. Bahá'u'lláh had never studied Arabic. He had not had a tutor or teacher, nor had he entered a school. Nevertheless, the eloquence and elegance of his blessed exposition in Arabic, as well as his Arabic writings, caused astonishment and stupefaction to the most accomplished Arab scholars, and all recognized and declared that he was incomparable and unequaled. If we carefully examine the text of the Torah, we see that the divine manifestation never said to those who denied him, "Whatever miracle you desire, I am ready to perform, and I will submit to whatever test you propose." But the epistle to the Shah, Bahá'u'lláh clearly said, "Gather the ulama and summon me, that the evidences and proofs may be established." For 50 years Bahá'u'lláh faced his enemies like a mountain. All wished to annihilate him and sought his destruction. 1,000 times they planned to crucify and destroy him. And during these 50 years, he was in constant danger. In this day, Persia is in such a state of decadence and ruin that all intelligent men, whether Persians or foreigners, who realize the true state of affairs, recognize that its progress, its civilization, and its reconstruction depend upon the promulgation of the teachings and the development of the principles of this great personage. In the writings of Bahá'u'lláh, it's prophesied that a king will come out of Persia promulgating these teachings, so that hasn't happened yet, but hopefully soon. Christ in his blessed day, in reality, only educated 11 men. The greatest of them was Peter, who nevertheless, when he was tested, thrice denied Christ. In spite of this, the cause of Christ subsequently permeated the world. At the present day, Bahá'u'lláh has educated thousands of souls, while under the menace of the sword, raised to the highest heaven the cry of Ya Bahá'u'lláh, and, in the fire of tests, their faces became illumined like gold. Then reflect what will take place in the future. Finally, we must be just and acknowledge what an educator this glorious being was, what marvelous signs were manifested by him, and what power and might have been realized in the world through him. So, this cry, Ya Bahá'u'lláh, O thou glory of glories. So Bahá'u'lláh is the glory of God, and so O thou the glory of glories. Abdu'l-Bahá are both different versions of the word glory. So, O glory of glory, glory of the all-glorious. Bahá, Abha, Bahá'u'lláh. So Allah is God, we know that. But so Bahá would be glory of God for Bahá'u'lláh. Baha'is, followers of glory. Yeah, so that's that call. And we have to recognize who Bahá'u'lláh is. Okay, so let's continue to chapter 10. Traditional proofs exemplified from the book of Daniel. Today at table let us speak for a little of proofs. If you had come to this blessed place in the days of the manifestation of the evident light, if you had attained the court of his presence and had witnessed his luminous beauty, you would have understood that his teachings and perfection were not in need of further evidence. Only through the honor of entering his presence, many souls become confirmed believers. They had no need of other proofs. Even those people who rejected and hated him bitterly, when they had met him, would testify to the grandeur of Bahá'u'lláh, saying, "This is a magnificent man, but what a pity that he makes such a claim. Otherwise, all that he says is acceptable." Okay, so it's saying that just meeting him was, it'd blow you away. Just his presence. But now, as the light of reality is set, all are in need of proofs. So we've undertaken to demonstrate rational proofs of the truth of his claim. We'll cite another, which alone is sufficient for all who are just, and which no one can deny. It is that this illustrious being uplifted his cause in the greatest prison. From this prison, his light was shed abroad, his fame conquered the world, and the proclamation of his glory reached the east and the west. Until our time, no such thing has ever occurred. If there be justice, this will be acknowledged. But there are some people who, even if all the proofs in the world be adduced before them, still will not judge justly. The nations and states, with all their strength, could not resist him. Verily, single and alone, imprisoned and oppressed, he accomplished whatever he desired. Yeah, okay, so it's citing the fact that his cause spread around the world even though he was in the most great prison. So even, as he was imprisoned and oppressed, he still accomplished his goal. I do not wish to mention the miracles of Bahá'u'lláh, for it may perhaps be said that these are traditions, liable both to truth and error. Like the accounts of the miracles of Christ in the Gospel, which come to us from the apostles, and not from anyone else, and are denied by the Jews. Though if I wish to mention the supernatural acts of Bahá'u'lláh, they are numerous. They are acknowledged in the Orient, and even by some non-Baha'is. But these narratives are not decisive proofs and evidences to all. The hearer might perhaps say that this account may not be in accordance with what occurred, for it's known that other sects recount miracles performed by their founders. For instance, the followers of Brahmanism relate miracles, For what evidence may we know that those are false and that these are true? If these are fables, the others also are fables. If these are generally accepted, so also the others are generally accepted. Consequently, these accounts are not satisfactory proofs. Yes, miracles are proofs for the eyewitness only, and even he may regard them not as a miracle, but as an enchantment. Extraordinary feats have also been related of some conjurers. Yeah, okay. So, saying that although Bahá'u'lláh did a lot of things which were supernatural, so miracles is what we'd call them, they're not sufficient proofs because other people use what you might call a miracle as a proof, and if they're false, then, or true, it's like accepted for everyone. And talks about conjurers in the end here, and in this modern day, there's a lot of crazy magicians, right, who can do some amazing illusions. So just doing some sort of illusory thing isn't what the manifestation of God needs to do to prove to us. Okay, I'll go on. Briefly, my meaning is that many wonderful things were done by Bahá'u'lláh, but we do not recount them, as they do not constitute proofs and evidences for all the people of the earth, and they are not decisive proofs, even for those who see them. They may think that they are merely enchantments. Also, most of the miracles of the prophets which are mentioned have an inner significance. For instance, in the Gospel it is written that at the martyrdom of Christ, darkness prevailed, and the earth quaked, and the veil of the temple was rent in twain, from the top to the bottom, and the dead came forth from their graves. If these events had happened, they would indeed have been awesome, and would certainly have been recorded in the history of the times. They would have become the cause of much troublings of heart. Either the soldiers would have taken down Christ from the cross, or they would have fled. These events are not related in any history. Therefore, it is evident they ought not be taken literally, but as having an inner significance. Our purpose is not to deny such miracles. Our only meaning is that they do not constitute decisive proofs, and that they have an inner significance. Okay, so although not denying that Christ performed certain miracles, saying that they have an inner significance and there's more to it. So and citing those things is not a decisive proof, because the supernatural events, people's logic, it's very hard to accept it as secondhand information. As we saw up here, a lot of people who see supernatural events can take it as the sign or a miracle from God, but even people who see them with their own eyes can still say, it's just a magic trick or something. So not denying Christ's supernatural miracles that he performed, but saying that they're not sufficient proofs. Accordingly, today at table, we will refer to the explanation of the traditional proofs which are in the holy books. Until now, all that we've spoken of are rational proofs. The state in which one should be to seriously search for the truth is the condition of the thirsty, burning soul desiring the water of life, of the fish struggling to reach the sea, of the sufferer seeking for the true doctor to obtain the divine cure, of the lost caravan endeavoring to find the right road, of the lost and wandering ship striving to reach the shore of salvation. Okay, so that's the state we should be in when we're trying to understand these things. It's not a state of trying to argue or trying to disprove a statement, but just trying to, with the thirst for knowledge, absorb the information that we're given. Therefore, the seeker must be endowed with certain qualities. First of all, he must be just and severed from all else save God. His heart must be entirely turned to the supreme horizon. He must be free from the bondage of self and passion, for all these are obstacles. Furthermore, he must be able to endure all hardships. He must be absolutely pure and sanctified, and free from the love or the hatred of the inhabitants of the world. Why? Because the fact of his love for any person or thing might prevent him from recognizing the truth in another. And in the same way, hatred for anything might be a hindrance in discerning truth. This is the condition of seeking. And the seeker must have these qualities and attributes. Until he reaches this condition, it is not possible for him to attain the sun of reality. Let us now return to our subject. All the people of the world are awaiting two manifestations, who must be contemporaneous. All wait for the fulfillment of this promise. In the Bible, the Jews have the promise of the Lord of hosts and the Messiah. In the Gospel, the return of Christ, and Elijah is promised. So the return of Christ and Elijah. Let's go for contemporaneous in the dictionary. Something to do with contemporary. Existing at, occurring in the same period of time. So both together. Awaiting two manifestations. In the religion of Muhammad, there is the promise of the Mahdi and the Messiah. And it is the same with the Zoroastrian and other religions. But if we relate these matters in detail, it would take too long. The essential fact is that all are promised two manifestations, who will come one following on the other. It has been prophesied that in the time of these two manifestations, the earth will be transformed, the world of existence will be renewed, and beings will be clothed in new garments. Justice and truth will encompass the world, enmity and hatred will disappear, all causes of division among people, races and nations will vanish, and the cause of union, harmony and concord will appear. The negligent will awake, the blind will see, the deaf will hear, the dumb will speak, the sick will be cured, the dead will arise. War will give place to peace, enmity will be conquered by love, the causes of dispute and wrangling will be entirely removed, and true felicity will be attained. The world will become the mirror of the heavenly kingdom. Humanity will be the throne of divinity. All nations will become one. All religions will be unified. All individual men will become of one family and of one kindred. All the regions of the earth will become one. The superstitions caused by races, countries, individuals, languages, and politics will disappear, and all men will attain to life eternal, under the shadow of the Lord of hosts. Now we must prove from the holy books that these two manifestations have come, and we must divine the meaning of the words of the prophets, for we wish for proofs drawn from the holy books. Okay, so two prophets are to come. All religions talk of the coming of age, where they'll come and the world will become unified, or a new age will appear, all of those things. A few days ago at table, we put forth rational proofs establishing the truth of these two manifestations. To conclude, in the book of Daniel, From the rebuilding of Jerusalem to the martyrdom of Christ, 70 weeks were appointed. For by the martyrdom of Christ, the sacrifice is accomplished and the altar destroyed. This is a prophecy of the manifestation of Christ. These 70 weeks begin with the restoration and rebuilding of Jerusalem, concerning which 4 edicts were issued by 3 kings. The first was issued by Cyrus in the year 536 BC. This is recorded in the first chapter of the book of Ezra, the second edict, with reference to the rebuilding of Jerusalem, is that of Darius of Persia in the year 519 BC. This is recorded in the 6th chapter of Ezra. The third is that of Artaxerxes, I think that's how you say it, in the 7th year of his reign. That is in 457 BC. This is recorded in the 7th chapter of Ezra. The fourth is that of another Artaxerxes in the year 444 BC. This is recorded in the 2nd chapter of Nehemiah. But Daniel refers especially to the 3rd edict, which was issued in the year 457 BC. 70 weeks make 490 days. Each day, according to the text of the Holy Book, is a year. For in the Bible it is said, the day of the Lord is 1 year. Reference number 5 in Numbers 14:34. Okay. Therefore, 490 days are 490 years. The 3rd edict of Artaxerxes, was issued 457 years before the birth of Christ. And Christ, when he was martyred and ascended, was 33 years of age. When you add 33 to 457, the result is 490, which is the time announced by Daniel for the manifestation of Christ. Okay, so a proof of Christ. But in the 25th verse of the 9th chapter of the book of Daniel, this is expressed in another manner, as 7 weeks and 62 weeks. And apparently this differs from the first saying. Many have remained perplexed at these differences, trying to reconcile these two statements. How can 70 weeks be right in one place, and 62 weeks and 7 weeks in another? These two sayings do not accord. But Daniel mentions 2 dates. One of these dates begins with the command of Artaxerxes to Ezra to rebuild Jerusalem. This is the 70 weeks, which came to an end with the ascension of Christ, when by his martyrdom the sacrifice and oblation ceased. The second period, which is found in the 26th verse, means that after the termination of the rebuilding of Jerusalem until the ascension of Christ, there will be 62 weeks. The 7 weeks are the duration of the rebuilding of Jerusalem, which took 49 years. When you add these 7 weeks to the 62 weeks, it makes 69 weeks. And in the last week, 69 to 70, the ascension of Christ took place. These 70 weeks are thus completed, and there is no contradiction. Now that the manifestation of Christ has been proven by the prophecies of Daniel, let us prove the manifestations of Bahá'u'lláh and the Bab. Up to the present day, we have only mentioned rational proofs. Now we shall speak of traditional proofs. Okay, so it looks like Abdu'l-Bahá has just used the maths of the Bible, understanding that a day is a year, and then showing us how that works and how the Bible proves Christ. I imagine he's going to go on to use the same methods to prove Bahá'u'lláh and the Bab. Okay. In the 8th chapter of the book of Daniel, verse 13, it is said, Then I heard one saint speaking, and another saint said unto that certain saint which spake, How long shall be the vision concerning the daily sacrifice, and the transgression of desolation, to give both sanctuary, and the host to be trodden under foot? Then he answered, Unto 2,300 days, then shall the sanctuary be cleansed. But he said unto me, At the time of the end shall be the vision. That is to say, how long will this misfortune, this ruin, this abasement and degradation last? Meaning, when will be the dawn of the manifestation? Then he answered, 2,300 days. Then shall the sanctuary be cleansed. Briefly, the purport of this passage is that he appoints 2,300 years, for in the text of the Bible each day is a year. Then from the date of the issuing of the edict of Artaxerxes to rebuild Jerusalem until the day of the birth of Christ, there were 456 years. And from the birth of Christ until the day of the manifestation of the Barb, there are 1,844 years. When you add 456 years to this number, it makes 2,300 years. That is to say, the fulfillment of the vision of Daniel took place in the year AD 1844, and this is the year of the Barb's manifestation according to the actual text of the book of Daniel. Consider how clearly he determines the year of manifestation. There could be no clearer prophecy from manifestation than this. Okay, so he just used exactly the same mathematical strategies to prove that Christ came after the 456 years, and that 2,300 years after that same time, where they were counting the 456, is equal to 1844, which was the year of the Barb's declaration. So when the Barb proclaimed his message to the world. So there you go. You can go watch that again if you want to go back through it. But next one. In Matthew chapter 24 verse 3, Christ clearly says that what Daniel meant by this prophecy was the date of the manifestation, and that this is the verse. As he sat upon the Mount of Olives, the disciples came unto him privately, saying, Tell us, when shall these things be? And what shall be the sign of thy coming, and of the end of the world? One of the explanations he gave them in reply was this: When ye therefore shall see the abomination of desolation, spoken of by Daniel the prophet, stand in the holy place. Whoso readeth, let him understand. In this answer he referred them to the 8th chapter of the book of Daniel, saying that everyone who reads it will understand that it is this time that is spoken of. Consider how clearly the manifestation of the Barb is spoken of in the Old Testament and in the Gospel. To conclude, let us now explain the date of the manifestation of Bahá'u'lláh from the Bible. The date of Bahá'u'lláh is calculated according to lunar years from the mission and the Hijra of Muhammad. For in the religion of Muhammad, the lunar year is in use, as also it is the lunar year which is employed concerning all commands of worship. In Daniel chapter 12 verse 6 it is said, And one said to the man clothed in linen, which was upon the waters of the river, How long shall it be to the end of these wonders? And I heard the man clothed in linen, which was upon the waters of the river, when he held up his right hand and his left hand unto heaven, and sware by him that liveth for ever, that it shall be for a time, times, and half a time. and that when he shall have accomplished to scatter the power of the holy people, all these things shall be finished. As I've already explained the significance of one day, it's not necessary to explain it further, but we will say briefly that each day of the Father counts as a year, and in each year there are 12 months. Thus, 3 years and a half make 42 months, and 42 months are 1260 days. The Bab, the precursor of Bahá'u'lláh, appeared in the year 1260 from the Hijra of Muhammad by the reckoning of Islam. Not sure what the Hijra of Muhammad is. It may be the day that he was that the angel Gabriel spoke to him, or it may be his birth. Let's have a look. The Hijra is the migrational journey of Islamic prophet and his followers from Mecca to Yathrib, later renamed by him Medina. Okay, so it's when he left Mecca and went to Medina. Okay. So, proofs from both the Bible and the Quran that the Bab is the Bab and Bahá'u'lláh is Bahá'u'lláh. Let's continue. Afterward, in verse 11, it is said, "And from the time that the daily sacrifice shall be taken away, and the abomination that maketh desolation be set up, there shall be 1,290 days. Blessed is he that waiteth and cometh to the 1,305 and 30 days." Wow. Okay, that's a mouthful for me as well. To the 1,305 and 30 days. The beginning of this lunar reckoning is from the day of the proclamation of the prophethood of Muhammad in the country of Hijaz. And that was 3 years after his mission, because in the beginning the prophethood of Muhammad was kept secret, and no one knew it save Khadijah and Ibn Nawfal. After 3 years it was announced, and Bahá'u'lláh, in the year 1290, from the proclamation of the mission of Muhammad, caused his manifestation to be known. It is this declaration which the Baha'is celebrate by the Feast of Rizwan, this name being that of the garden at the entrance of the city, where Bahá'u'lláh stayed during the 12 days, and where he made the declaration. Okay, so some proofs from the Bible and Quran. And let's go on to the next one.